I'm Alex Michaelson. This week, the issue is the future of the Supreme Court. We remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg and break down what's next in the fight to replace her. With us, former California Senator Barbara Boxer, who voted to confirm Ginsburg. We'll talk to her about the future of the Senate. And our powerhouse panel, 3 attorneys with different views, Jessica Levinson, Areva Martin, and Harmeet Dhillon. The issue is starts right now.
Broadcasting across California, California's only statewide political show. You're watching The Issue Is.
And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Alex Michaelson. This week we honor a liberal lion and contemplate the future of the Supreme Court and the U.S. Senate. Barbara Boxer represented California in the U.S. Senate from 1993 to 2017. There she was being sworn in by then Vice President Joe Biden. She was in the House from 1983 to 1993, and currently she's a teaching fellow at my alma mater, USC's Political Science Department. Senator Boxer joins us now from Palm Springs. As a Trojan myself, welcome back to The Issue Is, and fight on.
Okay. I'm always fighting.
Yeah, that is true. A long record of fighting on, Senator. Good to see you. Let's start, though, by honoring Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is a justice that you voted to confirm. I'm sure she was an inspiration to you in so many different fronts. What did she mean to you?
She meant a lot to the female senators on both sides of the aisle because she experienced so much discrimination. I was about 8 years behind her, and I also experienced it, but not quite as bad as hers, but pretty bad. And the fact that she understood what it feels like to be treated in an unequal fashion, having graduated at the top of her class, could not get a job, in a top law firm, being told by the dean of the law school, "Why are you here? You're taking a spot up where men would have that seat." She carried in her heart the pain of that.
Yeah, and I'm sure as a Jewish American woman, it was nice to see somebody as well. And also, who's taller between you two?
You know, it's so funny. When she came to my office way back when Clinton nominated her, I loved her immediately because we looked eye to eye. We were about the same size. I'm barely 5 feet. She was barely 5 feet. She was from Brooklyn. I was from Brooklyn. And I'll tell you a cute story. When I left the Senate, I retired, and I kept just a couple of artifacts that I wanted to have in the house. And here's one of them right here. Can you see it?
Oh, nice. That's very cool.
I have Ruth standing next to Rosie the Riveter as a reminder of, the battles that she fought, that I fought. It's really impossible to describe the loss.
Yeah.
Because it's like the loss of John Lewis. When you lose someone who, really felt the sting of this discrimination, you know that they have such authenticity that they can really change minds. And one of Ruth's goals was to change minds. And she was able to do that.
There are reports at the time of taping this that the president is going to nominate Amy Coney Barrett to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who ideologically could not be more the opposite. What do you make of that choice?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. It's like filling the seat of a civil rights icon with someone who, really doesn't care about it. And look, all of the people on Trump's list were vetted by the Federalist Society. And the Federalist Society is not interested in having a national government that really makes life better for people. So for this justice, Ruth Ginsburg, to be replaced by someone who doesn't see the world that way, it's a blow to all Americans. And that's why I think it's unbelievable that they're pushing forward a few weeks before the election with a new nominee, instead of doing what the Republicans said they would do, which is never, ever confirm a Supreme Court justice in an election year. And I think they are being shown up for being really hypocritical, very two-faced, and it's very unfortunate. It's kind of like, throwing a torch into the Senate. I served there with such pride for so long, and this is a betrayal. When you look someone in the eye and say, I will never do this, I will never confirm a justice in an election year, and then you go ahead and rush it through, you have no credibility.
But the reality is the Democrats can really do nothing to stop it if the Republicans stick together on this. And so the question then becomes, what do the Democrats do from there? There are some of your colleagues that have suggested that they should add additional seats to the Supreme Court. Good idea?
So I'm not giving up that we can't stop this. That's number one. Number two, I agree with Chuck Schumer. Everything should be on the table. When there's a betrayal like this, you have to look at everything.
But then, I mean, doesn't that just open a Pandora's box where you could end up with like 35 members of the Supreme Court and then the seat itself becomes such a more political institution?
There'll never be 35 seats on the court. That's just an exaggeration. You're taking it to the silly. The truth is, over the years, we've seen the court change in size. It's gone up, it's gone down, it's gone up and down. So this isn't unusual. But I'm not saying that's what should be done. I'm saying it should be on the table. I'm saying let's beat back this nomination, using the Republicans' own words. I'm not giving up on this at all in any way, shape, or form.
And lastly, you're now teaching at USC, talking to young people. We're at such an interesting and complicated time in our political history. There's so much anger and division in the Senate. What do you say to young people about being hopeful about the future and about where we take this thing? How do we put that genie back in the bottle?
Well, that's the best question. I am so renewed teaching young people, and I wish I could do it, face to face, shoulder to shoulder. I have to do it virtually. But the class is small enough, 15 students, so that I can actually make a connection like I'm trying to do with you right now. What I tell them is it's up to them. I do not lecture at them. I talk with them. And I am so encouraged because they really know the history of our country. They know about the struggle for freedom and human rights. They're a diverse group. And my strong belief is if young people would start to vote in the numbers that we older people vote in, we're going to see some great change. Positive change.
Well, of course, millennials by themselves would be the largest voting bloc in America if they only voted, not to mention Generation Z. So we hope that they do get out the vote, and that's a big point of this whole show, try to get people interested in voting. Senator, thank you for the work that you do. Always good to see you, and we always like to end with music on this show. So this week, there was some new music from John Bon Jovi and Jennifer Nettles about this moment in American history. Senator Boxer, thank you for being with us. We've got a panel to talk about all this when we come back, but we go out with more John Bon Jovi. More of this is after this.
And when the nomination comes out of committee, then I'll decide when and how to proceed.
It's just hypocrisy at its highest level.
The fight is on to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court before Election Day on November 3rd. We've assembled a panel of 3 smart, passionate, powerful female attorneys to talk about what's next. Areva Martin is an author, talk show host, commentator, and attorney. She has more jobs than I do. Areva, good to see you. Harmeet Dhillon is the founder of the Dhillon Law Firm, the Center for the American Liberty. She's a member of the Republican National Committee from California. She's one of the most powerful and influential Republican women in our entire state. Jessica Levinson is a professor at Loyola Law School, a guest on pretty much every TV show that's ever been on. And she is the host of a podcast called Passing Judgment, where she talks about politics, media, and the law. I was honored she recently did an episode with me all about The Issue Is. Thank you for that. Good to see all of you again. Some weeks we have 2 conservatives on the panel. Sometimes we have 2 liberals. This week it happens to work out that we have 2 progressives, but Harmeet is so strong and tough that I know she can take them both on. Harmeet, with that, let's start with you. Let's all concede that President Trump has the constitutional obligation to submit a Supreme Court justice. The Senate has the right to confirm that justice. The question is this the right thing to do so close to an election when they made such a big deal about not doing this in election year back in 2016?
Well, absolutely it is, because it is not optional for the president to do his duty to fill that Supreme Court seat, and neither is it optional for the Senate to advise, consent, and move it if they consent. And historically, going back to the 1880s, when the White House and the Senate are divided, the confirmations do not occur. And when they are of the same party, they have occurred in almost every case with one exception. So under that historical backdrop, this is the appropriate thing to do. We don't have a divided government. The advice and consent role will be fulfilled by the Senate. And it looks like they're prepared to move forward with one of the outstanding nominees that the president has identified. So there's really no reason for the president to hold back, and nor for the Senate to refuse to vote on this.
Jessica, your thoughts?
My thoughts very respectfully is that that's just utter hogwash. So the president is elected for 4 years. It's not 3 years to fill a term of a Supreme Court vacancy and then 4 years for everything else. This idea that the American public, if they elect a president from one party and then they elect members of the Senate that control a different party, are somehow sending the message that nobody should do their constitutional duty and fill a Supreme Court vacancy is totally tortured logic. And then the idea that we need to look at historical evidence. The bigger question is, how often does this come up? How often in an election year do you have a vacancy and a divided government? And that's your answer for why this is so rare.
So, I mean, Areva, if it was wrong that the Republicans stopped this in 2016, wouldn't it be wrong for the Democrats to try to stop this now?
It was wrong for the Democrats. I'm sorry. It was wrong for the Republicans to stop Merrick Garland from having a hearing and from being confirmed. That was a stolen seat by the Republicans, and moving forward with this nomination is going to be a second stolen seat. And the hypocrisy of the Republicans now saying that they somehow want to look back at history and make sure that their actions are somehow consistent with, some historical norms. This is a president that follows no norms, that throws all traditions, all norms completely out the window. So now to try to rely upon what he has, as Jessica said, some tortured logic about history is absolute hypocrisy. And he is going to pay a very big price at the polls for moving forward with this nomination. And not only will Trump pay a price, I believe senators, Republican senators, are also going to pay a price. And guess what? If we win the Senate back, I hope that Democrats move forward in increasing the size of the court and confirming the will of the people, rather than allowing this president to steal not one, but actually this Republican Senate to steal not one, but actually 2 Supreme Court seats.
Well, what you're saying, Areva, is actually a position that Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself disagreed with. Let's play that.
And well, if anything would make the court appear partisan, it would be that. One side saying, when we're in power, we're going to enlarge the number.
Harmeet, what do you think about that? RBG is against this concept.
Well, RBG is against the concept. Every responsible judge is against the concept. Only far left extremists are for this concept. And all this rhetoric about stolen seats and so forth is beside the point. The Senate has an advice and consent role. If the Senate doesn't consent, that's the end of it. Each of these 2 parts of our government have a role. Now, obviously, if the Senate majority switches after the election, the senators have certainly threatened, a few of them, not most of them, by the way, only a few of the extremists have threatened to make some of these structural changes. But historically, when FDR attempted to do that, to push his New Deal legislation through, it was other Democrats, including his own vice presidential running mate, who said that's a really bad idea. And so hopefully all of the adults in the room will stop that type of destructive behavior from happening. But in any event, we are probably going to hold on to the Senate, so this is a moot point.
That sounds like a real Republican National Committee woman there with the confidence. Jessica, your thoughts. Do you think that this is a good idea to potentially add more seats?
Yeah, I completely understand the desire and the anger and the motivation behind doing it, which is, okay, you're going to have, a 6-3 majority, which is, let's be honest, that's absolutely what's going to happen for decades and decades. And then there's this feeling by Democrats and independents who don't like the hypocrisy. What can we do about it? Our only dance move left on the floor is increasing the number of Supreme Court justices. I understand the feeling, but it's not an elegant solution to the problem here, because guess what? For all of the people who don't want a 6-3 majority of conservatives, at some point there will be another Republican president, and then there will be even more seats to fill. So this is kind of like the filibuster. You love it if you're in the minority, you hate it if you're not. We have to think really long term about making these big systemic changes. The better change for the Supreme Court, even though it is a constitutional one, is to say have really long term limits, have staggered terms so each president gets 1 to 2 appointments, and then we don't go through this lunacy which causes the Senate as an institution to look, frankly, like it lacks all integrity. And then you can just feel the Supreme Court starting to crater under this polarization, under the weight.
Areva, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think you cherry-picked comments from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She said a lot of things, and one of the things she said is that the will of the people should be what the Senate is also looking at as well.
True.
And we know that no way would she approve of this nomination process. In fact, her dying wish was that the next president of the United States make her replacement. So we want to talk about what her wishes were. That was her dying wish, and that's not happening with this president. And I disagree that expanding the court is somehow dangerous. I think there are lots of legitimate reasons why Democrats in office should look at expanding the court. Look, Donald Trump has thrown all the rules and the playbook out the window. And if Democrats are going to respond to Donald Trump, which I think they should, everything should be on the table. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi made that very clear. That includes having expansion of the court. That includes looking at giving statehood to Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., and not in my extreme leftist opinion, but in the opinion of millions and millions of Americans. These are the issues that should be on the table if the Democrats win the Senate and the White House. And by every national poll out there, that looks like what's going to happen come this November.
All right, Areva has already made the point that you think that this is going to help the Dems in the Senate races. Jessica, do you think this is a political winner, political loser for the Dems, having this issue front and center as compared to, say, coronavirus?
I don't. I think that it's going to energize both bases, but historically, Republicans are much better about organizing around the judiciary. Historically, Republicans are much better about educating the voters about the importance of the judiciary. If you think about some Republican voters who might be disgusted with President Trump's personal behavior, I think they're going to be looking at the Supreme Court, looking at the federal judiciary and say, he really delivered. But it's also energizing Democrats. I mean, there was a kind of a joke that went around last Friday when we all heard the news about Justice Ginsburg that never had so many women collectively texted an expletive to their other friends. And so this is energizing both sides. I don't know how it comes out in terms of who ends up benefiting, but I do know that the less we talk about the gross mishandling of the pandemic, the better it is for President Trump.
And last word on this, Harmeet, you study the politics of this. What do you see as the politics of this?
Well, I don't think that a lot of undecided voters are going to change their minds on the basis of this rather obscure inside the Beltway discussion. Okay, and I also don't think that despite all of the sky is falling, pearl clutching from Democrats and hysteria about back alley abortions that Joe Biden has been spouting since the Bork nomination hearings, that's ever actually come to pass. And in fact, conservatives have reliably, to the chagrin of many conservatives, voted to protect that Roe v. Wade decision. And so I would also say that for conservatives, we don't view it as a 5-4 court right now. As a COVID litigation pioneer who has appeared, has a case in front of that court, Justice Roberts has been a great disappointment. And so I think that ultimately conservatives are very motivated to have a 5-4 majority, and they think this is their opportunity. And I would finally point out, if Democrats want to fill seats, they should win the election. And if Joe Biden is the president, Joe Biden can fill the next seat. That's how it works in our process under the Constitution.
All right, we could go all day, but at some point we have to take a break. Up next, our panel is going to talk about the Breonna Taylor case. But first, one of the most beautiful moments from this week's remembrance of RBG came from her longtime trainer, Bryant Johnson. See him right there. He did 3 push-ups in front of his client of 20 years, RBG, the first woman and first Jewish American to lie in state at the Capitol. What a beautiful moment there. Let's end this segment with a smile. Here's a clip of RBG and Johnson working out with Stephen Colbert on The Late Show a few years back.
How strong are you on the Second Amendment? Because welcome to the gun show. Boom, boom, boom.
Why are you on your knees?
What? I'm cramping and I'm working out with an 85-year-old woman. Can I ask you a question? And I want you to give me an honest answer. Are you juicing?
No.
I choose the side of justice. I choose the side of truth.
Kentucky's Attorney General Daniel Cameron explains his decision not to prosecute any of the cops whose gunshots led to the death of Breonna Taylor. One officer is charged for wanton endangerment for firing his gun towards a neighbor's apartment. Let's talk about that case with our panel of attorneys this week. Areva Martin, Harmeet Dhillon, Jessica Levinson. Areva, let's start with you. A lot of folks may disagree with the law in Kentucky, but were the officers technically following the law?
I don't think so. And I think the decision by that attorney general was absolutely outrageous. First of all, this attorney general lacks complete credibility with that community. He tied himself to Mitch McConnell. He tied himself to Donald Trump. He spoke at the RNC. And the community in Kentucky and the activist community really around the country have absolutely no faith in the process that took place or in him as the attorney general overseeing the case. Over 190 days before any communication with the public, so a complete lack of transparency. And look, an indictment of an officer for shooting bullets into an apartment building, but no indictment for the bullets that went into the apartment where Breonna Taylor was killed, basically sending a message to African Americans that property in this country has more value than the Black life of a 26-year-old emergency room worker like Breonna Taylor. So the decision was flawed, and the presentation by that attorney general was equally flawed.
Harmeet, you agree with that?
Well, I think that's a total distortion of the way that the process works in a criminal case. Personally attacking and, implicitly calling Daniel Cameron not a good African American, as many people have done who share Areva's viewpoint, is beside the point. The Attorney General does not make that decision. A 12-person grand jury of Breonna Taylor's peers made that decision. And they made a decision to bring charges against one police officer. Now, separately, the state has acknowledged the terrible tragedy that happened here, which I agree was tragic, with a $12 million civil payment to her family. But under the law, these officers were acting according to the law. The warrant was lawful. One could argue that a no-knock warrant should not be lawful. Certainly, as a civil rights lawyer, I have serious concerns about that. But secondly, according to the evidence that was presented, apparently there was a knock. So we can try to demagogue Daniel Cameron, but what you're really doing is demagoguing a grand jury of 12 citizens who did their best. I'm sure they did. That's how the process works. So my prayers to her family, and I hope justice is done with that officer who endangered people's lives.
Yeah, the police say that they did announce themselves. There was one witness out of 12 people that were interviewed that said that they heard the police announce themselves. Breonna Taylor's boyfriend said that he did not hear the police announce themselves. But that is really at the center of this case, Jessica.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the only lawyer on the panel who's not a civil rights attorney, I'm going to defer on this one, except to say you're absolutely right. You zeroed in, I think, on one of the big legal questions. Now, before we get to that, though, again, let's acknowledge how terrifically horrifying this story is. I mean, it really is botched from top to bottom. And let's also acknowledge that, the headline for the African American community, I think, is so deeply hurtful. And yes, legally speaking, I think you have, again, focused on the right issue, which is, was it a no-knock warrant? Was there actual warning? Could they hear the warning? And then I think the second threshold question is whether or not they were acting in, within the scope of their abilities such that they were being fired on. Did they respond in kind, or was that excessive force? I mean, they did fire a lot of rounds at Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend. So I think that those are the two legal questions. And then the political question, I think, is actually pretty clear, is that it's deeply hurtful for the community.
It is deeply hurtful, and we've once again seen activists in the streets, many of them chanting Black Lives Matter this week. But it's been also an interesting thing to see from a political, raw politics perspective. Pew polls in terms of Black Lives Matter approval among white voters. Check this out. We want to put it up on the screen. According to this Pew poll, it was 60% support among white voters back in June. It's now 45% in September. Overall, it's gone down from 67 to 55. Areva, why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, Alec, I think that's the wrong comparison to make. The fact that 55% of white Americans even acknowledge systemic racism is a really big deal. We'd have to go back and look at that number before George Floyd was brutally murdered before our eyes, when we watched that officer kneel on his neck for 8 minutes. So I think the fact that we're even above 50% is quite remarkable. And it's a tribute to the protesters that have been out on the streets, not just for the last 4 months, but for the last several years, protesting systemic racism with respect to policing in this country. So I'm quite impressed with that number.
Other thoughts, Harmeet?
Yeah, I mean, this is a fundamentally decent country. This is a country that has got better civil rights than any other country in the world, and I say that as an immigrant of color. The idea that Black Lives Matters with capital letters as a movement, however, is representative of the decency of all those Americans who agree that all Americans should be treated with respect is farcical. And what is emerging from this situation, when you see not just the protests, but the looting that has occurred in every single situation here, and the Marxist calls for violence and tearing down Black families and tearing down institutions and tearing down our government that has come out of the 2 out of 3 Marxist founders of this organization, people are cottoning on to that. And people in Kenosha and people in Minneapolis and people in Louisville and people in all of these other cities, they agree that nobody should be shot because of their skin color. They don't agree that stealing handbags and breaking property is an appropriate response to that.
Areva, I don't think you're advocating for stealing handbags or breaking property. I mean, your response.
Yeah, those talking points are right out of Donald Trump's playbook. They're dog whistle racism, suggesting that what we do know is that 97% of all of these protest movements have been incredibly peaceful, and that there have been people, not necessarily Black Lives Matter protesters, but outsiders that have come in and have been disruptive in cities who have been responsible. Let's talk about Kyle Rittenhouse, who was involved in shooting not 2, but 3 and killing 2 protesters. So if we want to talk about the destruction and the damage, we got to talk about Kyle. We've got to talk about the violence that we saw perpetrated against peaceful protesters, not by other protesters, but by law enforcement itself. And so I think this argument somehow that Black Lives Matter protesters are responsible for, this mob mentality is absolutely offensive to me as an African-American woman, as a civil rights lawyer, and we really need to cut it out. Because the reality is, but for the
you
fact
have
that
no
those
more
protests,
moral authority than I do. This name calling is not acceptable. I'm not racist. You're not racist. So you don't have superior claim to call names like that.
African-American men are shot at a rate of 2.5 times that of any other person in this country. So, and until this country is willing to come to grips with the racism that exists in this criminal justice system, we're going to continue to have these ridiculous conversations about a handbag.
All right, we are going to have to leave it there. I am appreciative, though, that we have strong women with strong perspectives and a respectful dialogue, and that's what this whole show is about. So we appreciate all of you being here. We also do want to have at least one moment of joy. It's been a very stressful week for so many reasons. So in the last week, Kygo remixed Donna Summer's song, Hot Stuff. We want to take a look at that. That video with more than 3 million views in less than a week. A reminder to log on to our website, theissueisshow.com, to watch past episodes, listen to the podcast, also send us an email. And as we go to break, a moment to bring up the music and show off those moves. Ladies, thank you so much. Excellent discussion.
Thank you.
Next week, the event we've all been waiting for. President Donald Trump versus former Vice President Joe Biden on the debate stage. Recently, we spoke to former California Governor Jerry Brown, a veteran of presidential debates himself, on what we can expect. What would be your advice to Vice President Biden in debating Donald Trump?
Number one, practice, practice, practice. Number two, get your talking points. Number three, no matter what he asks you, you don't spend more than a second or two answering it and then pivot and give your talking point again. You have to hold your ground. Trump is going to try to throw Biden off. Trump has an agility and kind of an animal instinct that will push him toward the jugular. And Biden better be well prepared and have his armor well in place.
Check out more with Governor Brown on theissueisshow.com. On Tuesday night, we'll have a special live edition of The Issue Is right after the debate at 7:30 p.m. USC's Bob Shrum, TMZ's Harvey Levin will be with us. Watch on Channel 11 in Los Angeles. You can stream us anywhere at foxla.com/live. This week, we celebrated National Voter Registration Week. So many people taking to social media on that topic. A big shout out to friend of the show, Ben Lyons, and the team at Rock the Vote for their new campaign called Hooper's Vote. The WNBA and NBA leading the way to encourage voter participation, including some of this cool artwork. You can find out more at hoopersvote.com. And we end this week with a different kind of voter participation campaign. Exotic dancers in Atlanta creating a PSA encouraging you to get your booty to the pole. Whatever it takes, right? Thanks for watching. Enjoy.
Get your booty to the pole.
Get your booty to the pole.
Get your booty to the pole.
Get your vote, yeah, vote.